Outline. So I'm going to have just an introduction to talk about things related to, like the physiology and anatomy of the woman and the changes that happen throughout the cycle. Probably not many of you have covered this already in the personal training certification. Then I'm going to talk about and focus about the menstrual cycle, specifically menses. And after that, there's a small section on oral contraceptive use, how this will affect our performance, our strength, and our body composition. And after that, we're going to discuss menopause, and we're going to have a take-home message from this presentation. The way I organize my presentation is that, first of all, I talk about anatomy and physiology, what you know from general textbooks, what you can read online. Then I get into the research. I talk about what are the latest available research. We'll do some critical appraisals to these papers, and I'll try to give you a take-home message combining the anecdotes, the research, the studies, the evidence out there, so you can use something with your client. And also, I want you to know that there's a huge gap in research. It's still like we're not there yet. And one last thing before we start, every research I'm going to share, try not to take from it an outcome or a conclusion, because each and every research is like a piece of the puzzle. You need several research, you need your experience, you need your expertise, your client's preference, your client's values, to put all these together to have a complete picture. I'm going to start first of all showing you this picture showing the reproductive tract of the female. So you can see the uterus, the ovaries, fallopian tube, where when the ovule gets ejected or gets secreted, it goes all the way towards the uterus during pregnancy. The reason why I show this picture, first of all, is just as a refresher, just to understand the terms, because these are very important terms that you're going to learn more about when you talk about things like endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So you need to understand the anatomy first. Second, to see the location, to look at the location of the reproductive tract, which is in the middle of the pelvis, meaning that any sort of inflammation or changes in size and shape of the uterus specifically, it's going to affect the organs all around it. So you can understand a little bit as a start, the back pain, cramping, pubic symphysis discomfort, where it's coming from, because any changes here, it's actually surrounded by the SI joint in the back, the pubic symphysis in the front, so it's going to affect all the surrounding. And that's a clear picture without the pelvis, so you can find here the ovaries, and the ovaries, obviously, they secrete the ovules. Women usually are born with a finite number of ovules, which is around 400 to 450. When they're done, that's it, menopause. So it starts from what we call the menarche, which is the first menses, the menarche, at 11 to 14 years old. It depends from one individual to the other. And then it starts secreting ovules every cycle. Ovules sit in the fallopian tube waiting for sperms for the pregnancy to happen. A few things you might need to know and learn about. This is the uterus, and these are the internal linings, the endometrium. When you hear things like endometrium cancer or endometriosis, so these are things related to the lining of the uterus. So whenever I'm going to mention during the presentation endometrium, now you know what we're referring to. Usually, during pregnancy, this is where the egg sits at the lining of the uterus to grow and become a fetus or a baby. So these are the ovules that secretes the ovarian, the ovaries that secretes the ovarian hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And now we're going to look at the hormones and the whole cycle together. So what's happening here? These are the lining of the uterus. So again, that's the endometrium. So we were talking about the endometrium. These are the lining, the internal lining of the uterus. You can see the changes that happen. Why? Menses, period, it's due to these linings when they're shivering off. This is when period happens. So I'm going to show you what the changes that occurs with the hormones. So the cycle, a normal cycle, is for 28 days, more or less. Now, definitely it could extend to 30 plus, but usually, on an average, in research, it's defined as 28 days. It begins day 0 with the period or menstruation. So it's around 4 days to an average is 4 to 7 days. And then on day 14, there's what we call the ovulation. This is when the ovule is secreted, and this is when the woman is ready for pregnancy. And then there is the luteal phase, which is preparing for pregnancy. Now, the hormones, I just want you to look at the estrogen as a start, the main female or ovarian hormone. It's a very important hormone, and that's a key player in my whole presentation and in the woman's journey, at the gym, in life, everywhere. Estrogen is the female hormone secreted by usually the ovaries, and it starts peaking right before ovulation. Peaks, and then it decreases, and then it peaks a little bit back again in the luteal phase. So keep that in mind. Estrogen as a hormone, after the menstruation, it peaks and then it decreases. Progesterone peaks in the luteal phase. Now, what we're going to look at is the role of each hormones. I'm going to talk about LH and FSH later. However, for now, I want you to be aware of estrogen and progesterone. Now, menses or menstruation look like this. These are the lining at the endometrium. It was getting ready to accept an ovule, to receive an ovule, so to start, the process of pregnancy. However, it didn't receive one, that's why it shivered off and ovulation happened again. So that's the cycle, how it happened. So when we say estrogen, remember that it's not one hormone, it's a family. It's a combination of 3 different hormones. Estrogen, it's basically the family that embodies estrone, estradiol, and estriol. So keep in mind, estradiol is the most powerful one. Like usually they use it in exchange with estrogen. So it's estradiol. It's the main hormone that you keep on secreting until, that females definitely keep on secreting until menopause. During menopause, you keep on secreting estrogen, but not estradiol. During menopause, after menopause, females stop secreting estradiol and mainly secretes estrone. Now, estriol is usually secreted during pregnancy. The reason why ovaries are not able to secrete this hormone anymore, we'll talk more about that in the section on menopause. So basically for now, what I want you to understand is that estradiol is the most potent, is the most powerful hormone that we're going to discuss. So what's the role of this hormone? Physiologically speaking, what's the role? Now, I want to be honest with you, this information that we have on estradiol, and especially the ones related to exercise, it's on animal trials, because they were able to remove the glands that secretes the hormone and check what happens to their bodies, mainly rodents. However, we don't have enough human experiments. Like, definitely they're not going to do the experiment where they remove the glands, but at least studies that show that this is 100% sure, it's replicable what we have seen in the animal studies. It's the same when it comes to human. So what we know so far, we're not 100% sure, but what we know so far, that estradiol specifically, it have a lot to do with the bone metabolism. And I'm sure you've heard this, that after menopause, there's a high risk of osteoporosis, right? And another thing as well, it's lipid metabolism. And another thing you've heard after menopause, it's the gaining weight. It's not 100% sure, but many women, while going through menopause, they complain from gaining weight, or probably that's just a concern. And brain function, endurance and performance, reduced muscle damage. This is mainly, they started to confer more and more, especially for the women that are on treatment, that they take hormonal treatment and they take synthesized estrogen. So usually they notice that they recover much faster than control. Promote protein synthesis. However, we still need more research to understand what happens, and it can vary from one individual to the other. So that's estrogen as a start. Progesterone, it's more like the bad cop. It's more like the bad guy. However, again, it's still not 100% confirmed and understood. Remember, progesterone is secreted during the luteal phase of the cycle, post-ovulation. It's a hormone that helps in preparing the body for pregnancy. However, it might affect exercise performance negatively in terms of difficulty breathing, in terms of water retention. And I'm sure you've heard that some of your clients complaining that their body weight increases somewhere in the cycle. Like they complain like, my body weight increased for 0.5 or 1 kilograms. Why? And that could be the luteal phase. So that's for progesterone. So that's the main role of progesterone. So we know that it has to do a lot with hydration. We know that it has to do a lot with bloating, and it might affect in increasing body weight. However, we still need more research because all of that, it's like, we're not sure yet. Now, going back to this. So follicular phase, before ovulation, day 0 to day 13 or 14. Luteal phase, this is where the progesterone. So from what we discussed about the hormones, we can tell so far that, it might be good to train and increase the intensity here, but we might need to go light here. So that's the hypothesis. This is just, an assumption that for us to be able to confirm or reject, what we need to do is we need to look at research. So now, just before I start showing you, presenting a couple of studies, and they're actually new studies, like they're between 2020, 2023. I want to talk about the evidence-based practice model, because I can see some trainers, they're so into practice and experience, they don't buy into research. They say that research is something that changes a lot, and I just want to, learn from experienced coaches. This is good, but it has lots of limitations because you're not sure from the information you're learning from where you're getting it. Like if someone is saying that a pregnant woman is not allowed to train for the first 3 months, example. What kind of evidence do I have? Why do you have to trust me? Even if I'm a presenter, you should not trust me blindly. So I should present the evidence from where I got this information that I'm going to share with you. Other trainers, they're so into research. So they just believe research blindly. And still, there is no one perfect research. I read on an average 20 to 34 articles a week. And I can tell you that there is no perfect research. Every research has its caveats. Every research has its limitations. So what's the solution? We need answers. We're practitioners, huh? Our clients don't care about research and experience and what's going on in the fitness industry. They just want a program. They want a fun exercise program. They want advice on nutrition, and they want results. That's what they want. So here comes the evidence-based practice model to play. First of all, it starts by research and education. And that's why you get your level 2, level 3 qualifications. You start understanding the science and research and evidence. And this is where, whenever you want to search to answer a question, you should look at the literature, research. However, the second step should be adding your expertise, your area of expertise. Like, for example, you were saying that research says that the first 2 to 3 days, and it's absolutely true, by the way, the first 2 to 3 days of the cycle or the period, women usually are the most powerful at this stage. That's based on a paper that I'm going to share. However, would you apply it blindly to all your clients? No. Some clients, psychologically, they're not capable. Some clients, they feel weak. They don't feel like training. So you need to use your expertise to understand where to apply it. And finally, clients' values and preferences. Remember, your job is to create adherence, not just build one session, like one exercise program, sell one package, and that's it. You want to have people exercising to the rest of their lives, because we know all the benefits of physical activity and exercise. And to do that, you want people to do things they enjoy doing. They're not forced to do. So that's the evidence-based practice model. And when you're talking about research, it's not like, I know that you might hear presenters on TV shows or radio stations saying, there's a research that said 1, 2, 3. Okay, what type of research? You have different types of research, and I just want to share with you the 3 main types of research: observational, experimental, and reviews. Keep in mind, there's a huge difference. I might share with you, there's a research saying that exercise, resistance training is safe for a pregnant woman. And by the way, high intensity resistance training is safe for pregnant women. I wouldn't share this, even if there's a research showing that they got pregnant women, they were training, they were doing CrossFit, they were doing powerlifting, they were doing weightlifting, high intensity until the end of their pregnancies, and there were no complications for them or their fetus. However, that was just an observational study. I just recruited 670 women, and this is a real study, and we just sent them a survey, an electronic survey, and they filled the survey, and then I come up with a conclusion. Observational studies are good as a start, but they're not there for you to confirm 100% something. Like, yeah, I'm sure I can train pregnant women at a high intensity. No, you can't, because there's just this observational study. We still need more studies. And however, who says that they honestly filled the survey? What if they were training, they were thinking that they were training at high intensity and they weren't? And that's the reason why we use experiments. We use experiments. Experiments is you get the group of participants to your lab. You conduct the research, you conduct the experiment. You get a group of premenopausal, postmenopausal women. You ask them to train a standardized routine, like squats, 10 sets, 10 repetitions. They both have to do the same program. You compare, and now you understand, for example, if they recover the same way, they get the same results. That's an experiment. Experiments are more likely to establish causations, right? So this is why in this presentation I'm going to be sharing experiments and review, not going to be using lots of observational studies. Now you might ask, okay, since we know that experiments are like the best, why don't we conduct experiments all the time? Like, if you want to know if creatine supplement is effective, why don't we just get pregnant women and test creatine supplement if it's effective for pregnant women? Why do you think? And whenever you want to conduct a research, usually you're in a university setting. So there has to be something called IRB, Institutional Review Board. They will not grant you the ethical approval or approval to conduct the experiment. That's why we still lack evidence. And finally, reviews. Reviews are the type of papers where they review several papers or several research. Like, okay, I want a summary. What's out there on training women during their menstrual cycle? Just want a summary. So this is something called systematic review. They collect the papers. They filter according to an inclusion and exclusion criteria. And then they keep on the most important one and come up with a summary. If there was like a statistical data that they were able to grab and come up with a statistical analysis, this is then called meta-analysis. So from now on, if you're reading textbooks, if you're reading online, and you look at a meta-analysis, systematic reviews, you understand that this is usually the top quality evidence out there, usually. There are lots of exceptions. That's for the evidence-based. These are a couple of studies and research out there. By the way, I'm going to show you something. Have you ever heard about PMID? PMID. You can see here on each research, there's a PMID. This is PubMed identification number. So whenever you're attending a presentation, if you want to download the presentation in a click, you just need to type PMID and the number next to it. You will get the original presentation. If it's a free access, free online access, you can get it for free. If not, then you have to buy it, but you get the reference directly. That's the PMID. PubMed, which is the American database for most of the British, American, Australian journals on science and health. So PubMed, it's a website. Identification. So whenever you attend a presentation, you're looking at a post, someone is saying something, there's a PMID, look up this PMID. I want to build trust issues for you today. Don't trust me, don't trust anyone. Look at the PMID, read the original paper. All right, so mainly I'm not gonna talk about everything, and the reason why, these two studies from 2014 and 1995, they were replicated with a better quality in 2020. So I'm going to focus on two main reviews. So what are these? Observation, experiments, or reviews? These are reviews, systematic reviews. One that is exploring menstrual cycle effects on exercise-induced fatigability. So that's something you talked about, right? Fatigability during menses. And another thing is, if they're strength-related measure, does it affect strength and performance? It's another also review that we're going to discuss. So these reviews were published in 2020, and they were actually they were the only or latest reviews on that topic. So what's the purpose? First of all, we begin by looking at the purpose. The purpose is to investigate if there is any correlation between the menstrual cycle and menses, specifically the period, on fatigability, if it's actually clear in science, and strength and performance. So we want to understand, is it true? So what they did is they got several articles. They had their inclusion and exclusion criteria. They got around like hundreds of articles, and they kept, for the study on fatigability, they kept 46 studies, and for the study on strength-related variables, 21 studies. Imagine the filtering process is crazy. So hundreds of articles, just keeping 46, through a systematic process. That's why it's called systematic review. So they did the filtering, and now we want to understand the findings. So both, they were systematic reviews. So both, they were like systematic reviews, the strength-related variable and the fatigability. They're not experiments, not observational, systematic review, like a high-quality evidence. The first finding that we can discuss is, when it comes to strength and performance, that review couldn't find any difference between training during the period or training at a later stage. So they got several studies, where women were training during their period and women were training during other times during the cycle, follicular, mid-follicular, mid-luteal, and basically it was the same. Okay, just one thing here before I move forward. When I say early follicular, it represents the period, early follicular. Okay? Late follicular, this is ovulation. Mid-luteal, it's the middle of the second cycle. Late luteal, this is where PMSing happens. It happens at the end of the cycle, days 24 to 28. Okay? Usually in science, this is how they describe these. Now, let's look at fatigability. So the review on fatigability, they categorize the results. They categorize the results in things like related to a reduction in force following contraction. So meaning that the subject were doing an exercise or doing a training routine, and after that they tried to measure their force production to see if it was reduced, if it's reduced more during their period, or if it's reduced more at a later stage in the cycle. They looked at other things as well, like cycling endurance, running endurance. So they tested many things, many aspects related to strength, power, muscular endurance, and aerobic endurance. You see the difference. First, 9 studies investigated the effect of the menstrual cycle fatigability. Only 1 showed a difference. 8 other studies, no difference in fatigability. Same performance based on this review. Same performance. Now again, hold on. We're not talking about any conclusion. We're just looking at literature, research. So 9 studies, 8 of these studies showed that if a woman trained during the menstrual, during the period, or at a later stage during the follicular or luteal cycle, there's no difference. It's actually the fatigue levels are the same. Now, only 1 study showed that no, actually there's a difference. There's a huge difference. They can have less strength and less power and feel more exertion and fatigue during the period. More findings. 6 studies looking at the effect on strength reduction. So they've noticed that there's a strength reduction. Usually they do that on a leg extension machine. They test their isometric force production. They ask them to contract, and the machine is equipped. It can test the force production. Isometrically, they're contracting all the time, and they see the difference. So just 2 studies looked at the difference. So far, what I'm getting from the research is that there's no difference. So let's look at more findings. So cycling and running, the same. 1 study reported that women were more tired during the luteal phase, and 2 studies showed that women more tired during the follicular phase. So heterogeneous results here in the last finding. Now, here's the fun part. I was looking at the PowerPoint presentation for this session, and that was last week. What I do usually is I just go to PubMed and try to check if there's something new. And there were actually something published in March 2023. Imagine the amount of research that we're getting. And by the way, for whoever is interested in reading research related to pregnancy, yesterday there was a research published on pregnancy and high-intensity interval training, if it's safe for pregnant women to do high-intensity interval training. And no, I'm not going to discuss it right now. I'm going to keep it for you to access the study and read it. I can give you the PMID later. All right, so this is a new research, and it's looking mainly at the self-perception. So, okay, they're looking at, okay, if women, would it make any difference if women, they think that they have a painful cycle, that they're not going to be able to generate a lot of force? Would it be actually the truth? Like, would it make any difference if we asked women, how do you feel about training during your cycle? And they say, like, I don't feel well, I don't feel good, I don't like training during. And we try to test that. Like, we see how they think about it and practically how it happens. Would it make any difference? So what they did, the protocol they did, and this is for Carvalho and colleagues, again published 2023 March. What they did is they get a group of 26 participants. They had to be healthy. You can look at the inclusion criteria here. So they're healthy. They have a regular menstrual cycle. And by the way, they did a 3-month observation to make sure that they have a regular menstrual cycle, which is 28 days, around 5 days period. And they had to be active, doing more than 150 minutes per day. And this is something, in research that you always need to pay attention, like what kind of audience they're studying. Are they studying healthy pregnant women or healthy women? Are they studying non-pregnant or pregnant? It's very interesting, look it up. You can do a lot to help women with exercise, and research is more in favor of resistance training. And pregnancy and endometriosis. These are also interesting things to look up. What was the method? What were they measuring? Graded exercise test. So they have the woman on a treadmill, and they ask them to walk at a certain speed. Then every minute they increase the speed. They increase the speed. Every minute they increase the speed until they reach a point where they cannot continue anymore. So they measure this time. This is called time to exhaustion. So how long it took a woman to reach exhaustion during this test. And they tried to compare. So they did it at the beginning of the cycle and the end of the cycle, and tried to compare. Another thing is the body temperature, infrared thermography. So they measured body temperature at different locations just to try to identify if there's inflammations, and especially after resistance training. This will show it will give us a little bit of insight on recovery. And then menstrual diary for 3 months. They had a menstrual diary and a survey to fill every day for 3 months before the research. 26 participants, the number isn't the best, but it's not bad. Because to get people to volunteer in a research with this criteria, usually it's not something that's easy. You can find more information here about the participants: 64 average body weight, 164 centimeters height. So these are general information about the participants. So let's look at the findings. So the graded exercise test was conducted during the period and at the end of the cycle. And by the way, this is PMS. If I were the researcher, I'm not saying I'm smarter than the researcher, but looking at 2 phases where hormones are almost similar, at a similar level, I would also try to investigate something here and here. Either I repeat the test or I investigate, like instead of this phase, I would do it here to see if the hormones are going to make any change, especially when estrogen, estradiol, it's going to reach its peak level. However, that was the study, that was the protocol. For the graded exercise test, no difference. Same performance. Same time to exhaustion. So, time to exhaustion, the only difference, there were two differences. Time to exhaustion was longer in participants who did not perceive that their cycle influenced their performance. Whoever answered on the survey that, I don't think my cycle affect my performance, their performance was the same and even better than the control group. So that's a psychological factor. This specifically, it showed a psychological factor. Might be psychological, it might be physiological. And also they noticed that time to exhaustion was shorter in the follicular phase test in participant with self-reported heavy menstrual flow. So they asked them about the bleeding, the flow. If it's heavy, moderate, or light. And by the way, if you'd like to know the percentages, 54 had moderate bleeding, 23 heavy, and 23 light. Whoever had a perception of heavy bleeding, they were reaching fatigue much faster. The time to exertion was much shorter. So that's another insight. Okay, so you have all this information right now. What are you going to do with it? First of all, just before looking at the take-home message, I want to talk a little bit about the first two studies, two research that we discussed. A few limitations. Usually when you're conducting a research at a college or university, just think of it this way. You have a paper saying we're looking for volunteers or participants to conduct a study on menses. And women with cramps, discomforts, uncomfortable menses, if I put it this way, they're like, no, I'm not going to participate in this study. So that could be a reason that we have what we call selection bias, that only the ones with a comfortable cycle, the comfortable period phase, they're going to participate. And the results are going to be more in favor and going to show that they have more strength during that period. However, practically speaking, there are different point of views, and not just point of views, there are different anecdotes that shows otherwise. Now, by the way, you were referring to athletes. Yes. For athletes, specifically for that population, there's not much you can do. Training day is training day. Competition is a competition. It's not like, yeah, I don't feel like training today because I got my period and there's the FIFA or whatever competition it's there. Unfortunately. Why I'm saying unfortunately? Because there was a study also that showed during the ovulation, there's a high risk of ACL tears and injury in women, especially in athletic women. So, meaning if a woman is during the ovulatory period, and she's playing football, there's a higher risk that she might tear an ACL. And that's a concern for lots of institutions working, or hospital or medical doctors. And you cannot do anything about it because athletes, they can't change it. However, your clients can. And that's why I've put together a take-home message. So we know, first of all, that the menstrual cycle phase, there's some evidence that it affects fatigability. Okay, however, the effect is small. So that's why you need to take it by case-by-case approach. So it's so individual. So how it can start? So few studies showed that there's a difference, but the majority of the studies showed there is no difference. Anecdotes are different. Okay, so what you're going to do is, to begin with, it's that you need to understand we still need more research. It's really difficult to come up with one conclusion. That's as a start when it comes to research. However, one thing you can start with is asking your client to track their cycle. You know, there are lots of research showing the importance of these mobile apps, the trackers. Well, they can, it starts tracking their cycle and it learns and it improves the prediction. So what I would do if the client is comfortable for you to have these conversations, and especially it's challenging for male trainers to have these conversations with their clients, if you were able to reach a level of, like the client is comfortable, is open for, discussing sensitive topics, you can discuss this with your client. It's very important to ask them to track if that's okay with them, because some people, they don't like tracking. They don't like, looking at numbers and things. So if they're comfortable tracking, it will help a lot. Why? Because you can start experimenting. So what you know here is that they are powerful during the follicular phase. You can observe if they're actually powerful. If your client is telling you, I want more weight, add weights, you can increase the speed. During the follicular phase, then, okay, research is absolutely true. It was saying that during the follicular phase, that's what we can do, yeah, then go for it. So they may need to track their cycle, and you want to start experimenting and checking the different phase of the cycle. So once you get an understanding of the symptoms and also the body weight, when the body weight is increasing or decreasing, the symptoms, the perceived exertion, the simple RPE scale you've learned during your personal, like in your personal training courses. How do you feel the exercise? Is it hard, light? And check the RPE scale and monitor the RPE scale every time you train your client. Record that. Check the progress and try to look at the exertion and the cycle. If there's a conclusion, you can draw out there. So you need also to understand that whatever we discussed right now have nothing to do with women taking hormone, oral contraceptive pills. Why? Because they weren't included in the research. That's why I have a section in my presentation related to that. So whatever we discussed so far is related to healthy women training during their cycle, and that's a summary that's going to be a little bit practical. So the first part, which is the follicular phase, as a summary, what we can understand is this is when you can potentially, there's a potential to raise workout intensity in terms of speed, weights, resistance. There's a potential, possibility. It's not confirmed. There's a possibility. And it's feasible to perform complex exercises like squats. Why? They have more balance. When there's estrogen, when the body is strong, they have more balance. So complex exercises like squats, deadlifts, bench press, they can easily learn these exercises. And again, it's a possibility. 3, this varies greatly and depends on individual circumstances, their age, their training experience. Some athletes, they literally don't care. They can train on high intensity from the beginning of the cycle to the end of the cycle. Some of them, they have PMS, and some of them, they have PMDD, which is even worse than PMS. In that case, there is nothing they can do. And by the way, it's explained. PMS, it's not something like ghost thing that you think that women have. It's actually true. It's because of the fluctuation that happens between progesterone and estrogen that affects other hormones, that affects the mood. So some women have this fluctuation higher than the other. Progesterone increase and estrogen decrease more than the others. They have more cramps. They have more PMS, premenstrual symptoms, or PMDDs, which is even worse, and it needs medical attention. For the luteal phase, since we know estrogen or estradiol level decreased, what are the advice that you can share with your client or apply training your client? Consider scheduling a deload week. It doesn't have to be every cycle, but we know if you're doing a resistance training program or a moderate to high intensity program, you need a deload week every 3 weeks to up to maximum 5 weeks. You need 1 week where you drop the resistance, you drop the volume. And that's based on several research for Brad Schoenfield, Eric Helms, Greg Knuckles, showing that if you're doing a hypertrophy strength or performance program, you need a deload week. Actually, it can be here, especially if you monitored the cycle and you were able to confirm that this is the phase where your client is tired, your client cannot perform well. So you can include a deload week. What you can also do is the intensity may need to be reduced from starting from the mid-luteal phase, not just right at the beginning, up for less taxing exercises. So if you're doing a squat with the barbell, you can go for a front squat, especially if your client needs something that needs less balance or focus. With a front squat, your back is more erect, and the moment arm is almost equal between the quads and the hip. Or it could be a hack squat machine, so go from a regular squat to a squat, or simply, if symptoms are absent, keep doing what you're doing. It's not like because theoretically there's a change in the hormones and theoretically progesterone might affect you negatively, affect women negatively, that means you have to change the program. No, symptoms are not there. Don't change anything. Now everything is about symptoms. Do you know that ACSM changed the PAR-Q algorithm for trainers in 2018 and in 2020 and in 2022 again? What they were doing is they were focusing more on the symptoms. I remember when I was a personal trainer, when I started in 2003, 2004, I used to ask for a medical clearance from my clients, from any client. And then the algorithm in 2007 was like not all the client, the one that have high risk factors, like for example, male where their age is more than 45, women above 55. So several risk factors, then you ask for a medical clearance. Now, it's like, are they asymptomatic? You can start training them at light intensity if they're asymptomatic. They have a symptom, whether they're active or not, stop, get a medical clearance. So it's about the symptoms. It's about the symptoms. No symptoms, keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry. So, rest may be necessary during the period. You might need, remember, might need to avoid cardiovascular or anything that increases the circulation if there's heavy bleeding, if they insist on training. To sum up, the target here is keep them active. At home, you can do a couple of workouts for the core area that might be comfortable. Moving the core, unlike what you think, it eases the cramps. Especially like gentle movements, static contractions, yoga, Pilates, if she's comfortable. Number one rule, if she's comfortable. She's not comfortable, she prefers to have a day off, she should have a day off. She can do things at home. You can teach her to do things at home. She might feel better, like, yeah, I didn't miss a session, but I didn't have to move and go to the gym. Ovulation, avoid overstretch, bouncing, and high-risk exercises. Things that requires a lot from your ligaments, because this is a period where there's joint laxity. Okay, and by the way, just to share quick off-topic information, after week 10 of pregnancy, same thing. Not because of the same hormones, because of another hormone called relaxin that starts to get secreted and peaks in your body. PMS, what you can do? Stretching, yoga, meditation, aquatic exercises, specific core workout, things like internal core workout, breathing exercises, lots of research supporting yoga and Pilates here. Aquatic, by the way, doesn't have to be swimming. It can be just sitting in the water. That's it. It can help ease the cramps. If she's comfortable training after that, she can. You know, there's no evidence, like zero evidence, saying that a woman cannot train here or here, except if there was another condition. Like same for pregnancy. Do you know this misinformation or misconception that pregnant woman is not allowed to train for the first 3 months? From where it's coming from? From women that are under a they're going on a treatment for conception to get pregnant. The doctor will ask for 3 months of not doing anything. But that doesn't mean all pregnant women should do the same. It's just generalizing. We don't want to generalize this. So this is for the PMS, what you can recommend. Some stretches, yoga, Pilates, lots of research to support that. Zero research to support that, no activity. Do whatever you can to keep them active. That's the most important part. Okay, so off we go to menopause. First of all, it's a term used interchangeably just for, 3 terms. There's perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And I'll explain the difference. First of all, what's menopause? Remember when we said women have a finite number of ovules, around 450. When they're done, they're done. They reach menopause. So what will happen? Significant hormonal changes that I will explain more about in a few seconds. Decrease in estrogen level, and that's the problem. That's the issue. Our hero, specifically estradiol, not just estrogen. Estradiol, it's no longer secreted. It's replaced by estron, which is a weaker version of the hormone estrogen. Changes in body composition, and we'll understand why. And by the way, yes, it's common, but if women, they understand what to eat, the quality of the food, the caloric intake, no body composition changes, because eventually calories are going to come from somewhere. Yes, there are changes in their BMR. Yes, there are lots of changes to the whole energy balance equation, but if they have like a little bit of knowledge on how to manage that, nothing will change. Unfortunately, if they don't, this is when they're going to gain weight and fat specifically. Urinary incontinence, and by the way, this is also a nightmare nowadays for female lifters. During menopause, it becomes even worse. Joint pain and stiffness, mood changes as well. So it happens between the age of 45 and 55. So this is when it occurs. 50 million women annually. And it's expected in 2030, 1.2 billion women annually to reach this level. So, speaking of which, what's the difference between perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause? I'll give you some definitions. So normal, it's premenopause. This is, what we were looking at, period, things like that. They reach a point that is 3 months or 4 months before menopause. It's called perimenopause. Might be more than that, where the symptoms starts to appear. Like the symptoms starts appearing, irregular menstruation, 1 month on, 2 months off, fatigue, many other symptoms might appear there. And then menopause, it's more of a transition. It's more of a transition to postmenopause. Postmenopause is defined as the stage where women completed 12 months with no menses, no ovulation, zero ovulation. So this is called postmenopause. Menopause this is where she suffers from the symptoms. It could take up to several months, to a couple of months. So individual. What you need to do is to support your client during that phase. I don't think you can support your client a lot psychologically, especially if the symptoms are severe, but you can support in a way, especially when you use the two magical things that you learn in personal training: empathy, show empathy, and provide a safe space. Use your listening skills. Definitely refer when you have to. So what we're going to talk about the symptoms that happens during menopause, and we're going to look at one study on post-menopausal women. If there's a difference between recovery between post-menopausal and premenopausal women. So remember this hormone estradiol is no longer the hero. Estrogen is the hero now. Usually because it's secreted by the adrenal gland. Ovaries are not secreting a lot of hormones. So I'm gonna get to this quick, just for you to get an understanding what happens. This is how hormones work in your body. There's the brain, where there's a section called the hypothalamus and pituitary glands. They secrete the hormone that signals the period, that tells the body, start the period. This hormone is called GnRH. This hormone goes to the pituitary, which is another gland in the brain. Pituitary, by the way, they're super small, super small. So pituitary, it's gonna either secretes LH, luteinizing hormone, or FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. So it's either gonna secretes LH, depends on the stage. If it's the stage of ovulation, of period, it secretes LH. LH goes to the ovaries, ovulation happen, and then progesterone is secreted. It goes back to the brain. Okay, it's done. We have an ovulation. Stop ovulating. All right? That's the first part. If it's time to get the ovule prepared, this is when your brain secretes the FSH. It goes to the ovaries. They have, they have a bigger follicle now that is ready for ovulation, that secretes estradiol, that goes back to the brain and says, we're ready for ovulation, stop. Now think of it this way. No more ovules. No more ovules. Then what's going to happen is that this hormone is no longer needed because there's no follicles to get bigger and get prepared for the ovulation. Estradiol is gone. Which hormone is getting secreted more and more? It's the progesterone, and it's the SFLH. And this what causes mood swing. So at the beginning of the session, you talked about mood swing. It starts from this fluctuation in these hormones that you can't do anything about it. You cannot stop the LH or FSH. They can have medications, yes. And this is how it starts. That's premenopause. Perimenopause, this is when the fluctuation of estradiol gradually decreases. Here, this is the estrogen hormones that it's stable. And here, like after 12 months, usually symptoms are gone. This is when your client is much more comfortable here. Most of the symptoms, they're gone. She can train. This is called post-menopause. But the challenge is to keep your client training during the perimenopause and the menopause. Why? Because you have the pain, the cramps, the challenges, the fatigue, and the psychological challenges. Great. So, moving forward, what happens? What's the effect of the absence of estrogen? Decrease in resting energy expenditure, what you know as the BMR. That's almost 70% of what you use, the calories that you use during the day. So this is going to decrease. So what you need to do is look back at the energy balance equation and try to help her to adjust the caloric intake. Another thing, fatigue is going to cause what? So during the days where she's tired, is she going to, when she goes to the mall, is she going to use, I'll use the stairs, not the escalator? She's going to use the nearest elevator. Meaning, something called NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or calories that you use just from using the stairs, from fidgeting, from using your hands during the day, this is going to decrease. This is around 20%. And increase in appetite. The emptying of their stomach is much faster. Hunger, because of the hormones, is higher. There's more hunger. So if she is not on a controlled diet, because lots of research, they tried to compare postmenopausal women and women during their menopause and premenopausal women, they controlled their eating. They gave them the same amount of calories. They didn't see any difference in body composition. So the answer is clear. If they understand how to eat, if you can support your clients on, okay, these are caloric, rich in calories, nutritious, non-nutritious, so you can help them. And remember, if you're not registered dietitians or nutritionists, you're not going to be allowed to, have a nutrition plan, but you don't need to. You just need education. You need to educate them. They make their own choices. So then if you can help your clients with these, that's excellent. Now, why we insist on cardiovascular training? Because the risk of cardiovascular disease is almost the double after menopause. So there's a high risk of cardiovascular disease. That's why if your client is just doing lifting, now powerlifting is trending, CrossFit, CrossFit is good for cardiovascular training. However, other types of lifting with no cardiovascular training, you need to introduce this. Now, how you introduce it? Nowadays, research are showing us that we have thousands of ways. Ever heard of something called exercise snacks? Look it up, exercise snacks. It's like, I think there's 10 or 12 research published for the last 2 to 3 years. They tried to test it. Exercise snack, if you can do 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes during your day of exercise, is it going to lead to some cardiorespiratory improvements or strength improvements? It does. It's not like traditional training. But even if you do 1 minute, 2 to 3 times per day, 1 minute, sprinting for 20 seconds, rest, 20 seconds, rest, doing it like 2 to 3 times per day, imagine 3 minutes, it can still improve your cardiovascular fitness. So some is better than none. Another strategy is give them the freedom to choose. You want to do cardio, do anything for up to 20 minutes. Make sure that you're not tired. Just have fun. So you can build adherence. This is what we call up to 20 minutes below VT1, below the first ventilating threshold. Up to 150 minutes per week. Start from just 150 minutes per week. HIIT training. Oh my God, HIIT training is the thing now. It was the thing years ago. But research now on HIIT training is crazy. Lots of research are showing advantages. I told you 2 days ago, there was a research published on HIIT training for pregnant women. Is it safe? Is it helpful? Is it supportive? And there's lots of research that supports HIIT training in terms of cardiorespiratory fitness and many other things. And why resistance training? To prevent Osteoporosis. Quickly, one research. So this research is Para and colleagues. It's published in 2021 in the, I think it was in the Journal of, British Journal of Sports Medicine. 32 women in total, 13 postmenopausal, not during the menopause, postmenopausal, 19 pre-menopausal. They still have their period. They did the proper tests to make sure they have their period. They did the proper tests to make sure they are postmenopausal. Blood tests and many things. The workout is crazy. I wouldn't do this workout. 10 sets of squats. 10 sets of squats. And by the way, they were trained lifters, but unfortunately in studies, they tell you trained lifters, but they don't give more like explanation what it means trained lifters. And this is another limitation in research. Okay, great. 10 sets of squats, 10 repetitions, 60%, 2 minutes rest only, tempo 4-1-1. What they were trying to do, the researchers were trying to induce muscle damage. How do you induce muscle damage? High intensity, more repetition, and most importantly, eccentric. More eccentric training, more induced muscle damage. Okay. Postmenopausal, they did the workout once. Premenopausal, they did it 3 times. Why? They still have their cycle. They did it in the follicular phase, early follicular phase, close to their period. They did it late follicular, during the ovulation, and mid-luteal, right before PMSing. So, the assessment, they assessed the quad and glute soreness. They took blood draws to check the biomarkers, several biomarkers to check if there was soreness in the quads and the glutes, jump height, to check their power, and they had blood draws also. So the testing happened once for postmenopausal, 3 times for premenopausal. I'll summarize the findings in one statement that I cropped from the study, saying that exercise-induced muscle damage was similar. This is crazy. Okay, it was similar. This is postmenopausal. No symptoms, no like pain is no more pain, and okay, I understand. But how come? How come that muscle damage is the same? Well, it makes sense. Why? Because postmenopausal effect happened throughout the years. And if you're already trained, this effect happened gradually, slowly. So you will not see, like you will eventually see decline in muscle recovery, and not just because of menopause, because of aging as well, but it happens slowly. So menopause does not have significant impact on recovery rates for lifters. Yes, for non-lifters, it has an impact, but this impact happens and build up slowly. Recovery rates will eventually slow down with age, but menopause is not the primary cause. So, lifters approaching menopause do not need to worry about sudden decrease because it happens over the time. What you need to consider is doing cardiovascular training because there's a high risk. Anyone should do cardiovascular training. If they're not doing it yet, they have to start because the risk of cardiovascular disease is going to double. Resistance training for osteoporosis and nutrition management. I'll leave the questions till the end. So if anyone wants to leave, they can leave. I have a special quote that I'm going to read and share with you. And mainly I have 2 messages. One message for the ladies in the room and one message for definitely all the audience. So this is a quote that I took from Lady D, Princess Diana's, one of her speeches, saying, "I think every strong woman in history has had to walk down a similar path. And I think it's the strength that causes the confusion and the fear. Why is she strong? Where does she get it from? Where is she taking it and where is she going to use it?" So ladies, what I want from you is to stay active, keep lifting, stay strong. And everyone, inspire your clients to do the same, especially the ladies, to keep lifting, stay active, and keep the world confused. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the session. I'm here to answer all your questions. Thank you.